Good morning, folks. We're going to go out in the garden and pick some green beans. So come along for the ride. We'll show you what's up out there. We got to grab our picking bucket. On the way out to the garden, we'll show you the fruit trees. We got some new additions. Our pluots that we planted are doing okay. They're not showing any signs of stress at all. We went by the local farm store here last week, and they actually had some fruit trees in a pot, which is not normal for this time of year. Usually it's only the spring you can get fruit trees. So we've got another peach here that they looked really good. They were nice and vigorous in the pot. And then here we got another Bartlett pear. And clear down here on the end, we got us a Fuji apple. And they all look really, really nice. So we're quite happy that we were able to get these in before we start getting some moisture this winter. I think the only tree we got left to address is this hackberry here. We're going to lose it and find a fruiting mulberry to put in here because that's what we originally wanted. But all the fruit trees are in now, so if they all live, we'll be 100% here in the fruit orchard. We're happy about that. Kelly's clematis here on the chicken coop is about ready to explode in blooms, so that's going to be beautiful. I guess it's called an autumn something or other. Autumn clematis. Kelly's out collecting eggs because we got in late last night from homecoming football game. Is she broody?
Both of them are.
Got to kick them out.
Kick them out for food and water.
But the girls have been doing really good. Cat's getting some beautiful tail feathers on him. But couldn't ask for a better flock of girls. There's Hershey. Have some water, Hershey. The Concord grapes are getting bigger. And then the next one is a red Swinson. Got a few little grapes on it, but we probably won't get much off this year because we've been doing some heavy pruning. Here's some older ones here, some little ones. But we won't get too many off the red Swinson. And then this is the Catawba down here. And it's setting some grapes on that. Let's take you for a quick little tour in the garden before we get out those green beans. We were able to stop the bug from eating our broccoli and cauliflower. We're about due to spray them again. We're using a real mild spray on these. And to my surprise, remember these two here that were just eaten right down to the nub? They're actually coming back. Crazy. So surprised to see them coming back. But the other plants are getting big. The lettuce and the kale. We've been feeding kale to the chickens, but the lettuce is all done. And then the jalapenos are ready to pick again. The artichokes, the lower first leaves are yellowing a little bit. I'll probably prune those off. But this plant's finally starting to catch up with the other plant, so we hope these do okay. Jalapenos are loaded. Still got plenty of dill. We pulled out the cucumbers because we were all done with all the cucumbers we needed. Literally hundreds of cucumbers off these two little plants. Kohlrabi was harvested quite some time. I've pulled up the peas, pulled the roots to get them to dry out so we can pull them off. They had a lot of powdery mildew, so we're letting that dry up before we pull them out. The tomatoes, showing lots of green tomatoes, but nothing red on the bigger tomatoes yet. We've got down here we had some Better Boy and some Celebrity that we replanted when the couple Better Boy didn't work out. We've got some San Marzanos here with green tomatoes on them. Those are more determinate tomatoes, so those are all going to kind of come in at one time. And then some more Celebrities down here. And we're finally getting some red cherry tomatoes. I picked some the other day. We got some more orange ones on here now that will soon be red in a day or two. The habanero peppers, gonna be loaded here pretty soon. Little sugar baby watermelon here on the end. Got a little melon down there. But this next sugar baby did better. It's got some sugar baby melons on it. You can see the melons down in there. And then our Crimson Sweet. Got some big melons in here. You can see those. And then our cantaloupe, I think I'm going to pick one of these cantaloupe out of here today and try it. The skins are more tan now than green, just very little green, so it's just about time on those. Our 3 zucchini squash plants that are left are still chugging along. I think I'm going to pick what's on there, and then I may leave them in, I may take them out. Butternut squash, we have butternut squash all over in here. Crazy amount of butternut squash. And then our Hubbard squash, I saw a handful in here, but the butternut just kind of take over everything. Let's see if I can find a Hubbard. There's a Hubbard down in there, and I'm sure there's a few more. There's another one over there, but the butternut squash just take over. They're clear down in here. These are the buttercup squash here on the end. And you'll see we have a butternut squash clear down here on the end of the buttercup squash. There's a buttercup right there. But it grew from here, grew to here, all the way from over here. So it completely went through the buttercup plant. But squash is going crazy. Here's our green beans. We got to get after picking these babies. Our first cantaloupe, and there's probably 10 or 15 more in there. It's gonna be yummy. All right, we are now snapping our beans, and you want to snap your beans right after you pick them, because otherwise they're not going to snap. They will be rubbery, and you won't hear this when you snap them. And then I just snap the ends off. Anything that's small I don't snap in the middle, but like a longer bean like this, I'll snap both ends off and then just snap it in the middle like that. Now we're going to do our beans this year 2 ways. This first batch I'm going to pressure can, and then the next batch we do I'm going to freeze, because Kelly prefers frozen green beans over canned green beans. She will eat them, but I dress them up a little bit when I cook them so that they're not like your standard canned green beans. Now, anybody that's been around a time or two like I have, you'll remember that these used to be called string beans. They weren't called green beans. And that was because when you snapped them, you'd snap them and then you'd have to pull this long string off that was on the back spine of these beans. And that was another part of the process. So, but nowadays they've bred that out of the beans or cross-pollinated, did whatever. And now we have stringless beans. That's why they call them green beans now. So just another little piece of history for you. So we're going to continue to snap these beans. And then we're going to pressure can them in our new Presto pressure canners. And because we have so many beans, I think I'm going to get both canners out. And we'll do them 2 batches at a time. So stick with us and we'll get these bean snaps and get it going. While I'm snapping green beans, Kelly is taking care of the herbs that she dried from the garden. Currently working on the thyme, getting everything off the sprig. Still got some rosemary over here. And she's also freezing a bunch of kale that she picked out of the garden also. So we're having a real good productive weekend. Now inevitably when you're picking green beans you miss a few or miss a lot. Kelly went through and picked probably another quarter of this container over here after I got done. But you'll find some that you've missed before and you'll notice that the beans have like fully formed inside the pod. Now these are going to be a little tough if you cook them. If you miss them for too long, you can leave them on the plant and dry them up. And when we pull those plants up, there's going to be a bunch of dried beans on those plants. And we'll pull those off and let them dry completely, and those will be what we can replant next year. But you can see inside of the pod here how the beans have like fully formed. So you want to put this in the chicken pile. Don't worry about canning any of these. Now pressure canning is a little bit more forgiving because it tenderizes a little bit more than what you would do freezing and cooking them or cooking them fresh. But these are like whole beans in here. And they'll be a little tough, so we're just going to throw these in the bin. We got her done. All them beans are snapped. Look at that big old bowl of beans. That's going to be quite a few jars in the pantry. Kelly is washing her kale, getting it ready to freeze. She's using her little salad spinner thing here to dry it all off after she takes it from the sink. And then she's going to put it in the freezer. I think I'm going to try to put some kale on a pizza one of these days here real soon. I got a recipe for one with spinach. I think the kale would work okay. So next step is we're going to get both of those canners out. We're going to get our jars ready and we're going to get to canning. Alright, we're going to get our cycle going on our first canner here. When you first plug it in, it comes up as pressure can, which is what we want. So you'll press the middle button here, and then it's going to ask you how much time. And for these pints, we're going to do 20 minutes. So we set that on 20. Press the button again. It says insert jars, which we've already done. I put a little water in the jars so they don't float in the water that we put in the pan. There's a line down in the pan that shows you how much water to put in. So I put a little water, like I said, in the jars so they don't float. And then we put them in there. So we've loaded the jars, or inserted the jars, excuse me. So we press that again. Now it goes to warm. We're going to put the lid on here. We've already checked the gasket, make sure it's seated correctly. We're going to put that on there like that. And it's going to go to warm. We make sure that our canner is in the vent position. And we'll lock our little pressure sensor down. Now when this thing is warmed up, the jars are warm, it'll beep and it'll let us know. So we've already got some boiling water going here, which we're going to need to fill our jars. We're doing a cold pack on the green beans, but even with a cold pack, you're going to put boiling water onto the cold beans in the jar. We've got about half of our beans in the colander here. We've washed them up real good. Take off any dust or anything. They had them on them from the garden. And as soon as this canner says fill jars, when it beeps, we'll start filling our jars. Our water's already boiling. And then after we fill our jars, we're going to add a half a teaspoon of salt to each jar. If it was a quart jar, we would add a full teaspoon of salt. Alright, the canner beeped. It says fill jars. So we took the lid back off. We're taking the jars out one by one. And then I'm filling the jars with the green beans over at the sink. And then Kelly's putting the salt and the boiling water in, putting the lids on, and then putting them back into the canner. Got our jars filled. This thing does 7 wide mouth pints. I believe it does 8 narrow mouth pints. So the time has come. Let's check our seal again because we've taken the lid on and off. Seal looks good. We lock it in position. We leave that in the vent position there. We go ahead and lock down our pressure sensor, and then we hit the button down here again, and it's going to heat. Now once it's done heating, it'll go into a vent mode, which means it's going to vent the steam out, or the air out, excuse me. And then once the air is vented out, this thing here is going to pop up, and then we'll close this down to canning mode here, this vent here. And then we'll it'll go into the canning cycle, which takes 20 minutes. So we're going to get our other canner out and get it full. Alright, our first canner is 7 minutes into its 10-minute vent cycle. And when that's done, we'll, like I said, we'll close the vent, press the button. And this canner beeped, and it's time to fill jars. So we're going to start filling this one up. Alright, this one's done with its vent cycle. It says put regulator on, but I don't take the regulator off. And I'll explain that here in a second. What we do is put this in can mode right here. And then we press the button again. Now it's in canning mode, and once it reaches pressure, it will start counting down. Now the reason I don't take this regulator completely off anymore is because reading the instructions, or the instruction user manual, they say the only reason they have you take this off is because people forget to keep it in vent mode before you start canning. Well, I've been canning for a long time, and I can remember how to do that. So I leave the regulator on, but I put it in the vent position. So as this thing builds pressure now, our safety blow-off valve here is going to kick up to where there's no way you can open this lid, because this will not turn once it gets under pressure. You see, we're filling our other one up. Alright, we've got our second canner full. And our first canner, you can see the pressure valve has popped up, closing the canner off. And it's already 3 minutes in to its canning cycle. Now it only takes 20 minutes for the canning cycle. However, there's a cool down period and stuff like that, so you just can't open this up in 20 minutes and start over. It's going to cool down for about an hour or so before you're going to be able to put in your next batch. And the reason you got to cool down slow like that, if you do open this vent and do a fast pressure relief, you're going to lose a bunch of liquid out of those jars, and your jars will only be about half full of liquid. So let this thing cool down on its own. From this point on, once we get the thing full and it starts heating, you can pretty much walk away and go do something else. You don't have to sit here and babysit this. You can even go to town if you want and just leave her. But we got 2 of them going. So once this thing's ready for the next step, it'll beep, and then they'll both be going. Our second canner is still in the heating mode. It hasn't got to the vent mode yet. And our first canner is already done and into cool down mode, which is going to take a while. That's why it's nice having 2 of these. I'm so glad Kelly surprised me with the second canner when we were able to get them. When we got our pressure canners, we've been waiting for a long time. I've been watching because they were out of stock. Because as soon as the USDA gave the A-OK to use these things, they flew off the shelves. Everybody had to have one. So we waited for quite a while, and I was on Amazon and I saw them, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I jumped on there and I ordered it. Well, they emailed me back, and you probably heard the story on the other video, but we had a hard time And finally got them at Wayfair, but right after we got them, they went right out of stock and couldn't get any more. And we got the last 2 probably they had. But since then, they're showing back up online again. Wayfair says they have more. Walmart says they have some. Ace Hardware has some. Home Depot says they have some. But be careful, make sure they have them in stock. And some of those places don't ship. You have to pick up in store, so you got to keep that in mind too. But you'll see some online from a company you've never heard of for like $90 or $80. Stay away from those people. Go with a reputable company that's selling these things so you don't get ripped off, because they don't cost $90. In fact, they're about $100 more than what we paid for them now, the ones that are listed online. So be careful when you buy. All right, our first canner has cooled off to where it released the lid. Is we were able to get 5 more jars of the green beans before we ran out. Now you don't have to fill this full. It doesn't have to have 7 jars in here. You can put 1 jar in there if you want. Don't matter. It'll still process. So we'll get our lid over here. Check the seal. The seal looks good, still in place. Put this baby back on. Make sure you're in the vent position. Lock your pressure sensor down. And we were on fill jars, so we pressed the button and now it's heating. So after this thing vents and we close the vent, we can walk away from this. And let's see, we've canned 14 plus 5, that's 19 jars of green beans, and we're done by about 3 o'clock. So that's pretty slick. Now our other canner is in cooling mode. Like I said, you just wait for this thing to pop back down. Once it's released pressure, then you open your vent and you can take your lid off. Here's our first batch of green beans over here on the counter. And I'm doing an experiment on this last batch with the 5 jars. I'm putting a 1/4 teaspoon of our fruit fresh, kind of citric acid, whatever you want to call it, to try to see if we can keep the bright green color in our green beans. So we're going to do that as an experiment. We'll let you know how that goes. Now when I make these canned green beans, I do them a couple different ways. So sometimes I'll do what's called like a green bean vinaigrette. My mom used to make that all the time, where you cook some onions and bacon in a little saucepan until it's done cooking, and then you pour your jar of green beans right into that. And then a little splash of white vinegar, like right around a tablespoon, not very much, doesn't take much. And then you cook that through, and then that's a fantastic way to eat green beans. I really like that. The other way, I dump the whole jar in the saucepan, I heat it up, and then I drain it, and then I put a pretty good little block of butter in there, let it melt, and then some kosher salt, and then stir that up, and that tastes really good, fantastic that way too. But I'm sure you got other ways to eat green beans, so this is a really good way to preserve them. Now another thing I wanted to show you is this jar right here. In our last batch of green beans, we took some fresh green beans, washed them up, we put them in the jar, and we poured our dill pickle brine over it that you've seen on this channel before. And this makes a fantastic dilly bean. Really, really good. I've already had a few of these. Super yummy. So that's another idea to do with green beans. You could actually do any flavor profile. It's basically a refrigerator pickle, though it is. And you can do that with really any vegetable. So there it is, folks. About 4 hours from being on the vine to in the can. You don't get much fresher than that. And you can come out with a really good product when you're on it like that and you get her done. So really loving these automatic pressure canners. We got our last batch in. We're going to go to the movies tonight, and we're going to leave here in a little bit because our movie starts at 4. And we can just leave and let this thing run. Don't hurt a bit. So, till next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. If you got any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments. If you want some other canning videos, we'll post some right up here in the corner. So, see you on the next video. Bye.